Militant Quaker, Alice called in the final campaign for women's suffrage by Joanna.
No. No, I won't. Nightmare again. Will it ever stop? What time is it? They'll be here any minute. Oh, you're here already. Why, Lucy, you've invited so many new faces to our vigil. And I suppose you'd like me to speak. Very well. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Alice Paul. Together with the help of other committed suffragettes, I established the National Woman's Party several years ago. Today, on August 18, 1920, we find ourselves on the verge of a momentous victory for our cause and indeed for our country. As we women meet in our offices in Washington, D.C., a group of men meets at the State House in Nashville. Will these legislators make Tennessee the 36th state to ratify the 19th Amendment? Will suffrage finally become law? Will women at last have the right to vote? I honestly don't know if victory will be ours today. But I do know that progress continues, and I firmly believe that success is inevitable. When our grandmothers took up this cause over 70 years ago, women did not have the right to vote in a single state. But thanks to the brave and dedicated efforts of trailblazers like Susan B. Anthony, Elizabeth Cady Stanton, and Lucy Stone, suffrage was brought to the forefront of American consciousness. Women are now enfranchised in 12 Western states. But due to the repeated defeats of ballot initiatives in Southern and Northeastern states, our party has adopted a new strategy, one that differs in approach from our predecessors and even from some of our contemporaries. Our strategy is a bold one, and to many, it is controversial. We hold the political party in power accountable. Do not misunderstand. I personally admire and respect President Wilson. But I do not think that we should allow him or any other politician to patronize, marginalize, or ignore us any longer. The essence of our campaign is opposition to the government. It is not a war of men against women, for the men are helping loyally, but a war of men and women together against the politicians. We have come this far not through submissive compromise, but through vocal activism. Burning the president's speeches, labeling him Kaiser Wilson, and picketing the White House were new and unheard of tactics. We were labeled antagonistic, disrespectful, and unladylike. But I ask, what choice did we have? When a country sends its troops overseas to protect the liberty of foreign citizens, yet denies fully half its population the right to vote, can it truly be considered a democracy? I understand that every reform movement, every controversy comes with complications. But to me, there is nothing complicated about ordinary equality. I find it hard to understand how anyone can believe otherwise. I recall attending suffrage meetings with my mother when I was just a girl. And I remember having lively conversations on all matters of conscience. As Quakers, my parents raised my brothers, my sister, and me with an abiding belief in the equality of all people, regardless of race, social class, or gender. I suppose it was these fundamental beliefs that led me to pursue a career in social work. I saw haggard women working long hours in factories, sweatshops, for meager wages and in unsafe conditions. I myself worked in a rubber factory, standing all day doing piecework to earn wages that barely paid for board in a tiny, cold attic room. Yet countless women must provide not only for themselves but for their families on a mere pittance and risk their health and very lives in so doing. I was and I remain committed to improving working conditions. But I realize that when you help only one person at a time, you cannot have a long-lasting or widespread impact. When women, universally, have no workers' rights, no property rights, no domestic rights, the only recourse is to work for change in the law. Becoming enfranchised Gaining the right to vote is the key to improving the lives of women today. And that is why I founded this organization. Many people have criticized our militant tactics and questioned how I can reconcile them with being a Quaker. But I assure you, I remain a pacifist through and through. I condone neither war nor violence. But I do believe that the First Amendment grants every American the right to free speech and assembly. If passive resistance and civil disobedience are the means at our disposal, then we are obliged to use them. Activism in these forms is not equivalent to violence. A review of our actions proves adherence to this principle. Our first demonstration, the magnificent pre-inaugural parade down Pennsylvania Avenue in 1913, with 5,000 marchers, was a lawful event. It only erupted in violence when district police failed to restrain bystanders who heckled us, threw bottles at us, and assaulted us. 3 years later, our daily pickets at the White House were also peaceful protests. We did not slander the president. We merely carried signs, quoting his own lofty statements about liberty and democracy. We became known as the silent sentinels who let hypocrisy speak for itself. Yet, we were arrested on the frivolous charge of obstructing sidewalk traffic. We were thrown roughly into paddy wagons, tried without cause, and sentenced to weeks in the Occoquan workhouse under intolerable conditions. Freezing temperatures, worm-infested food, and sheer brutality. The press called November 15, 1917, the night of terror. Mary Nolan, you, a 70-year-old woman, were dragged along a damp floor and thrown into a cold concrete cell. Dora Lewis, you were beaten over the head and suffered concussion. Lucy Burns, you were chained with your hands above your head and left hanging all night, choking and gasping for air. As for me, I simply refused to eat. For my hunger strike, I was punished with a vengeance. The wardens tied my arms and legs to a chair while the doctor stood behind and held my head back. He pulled a towel so tight around my throat that it constricted my windpipe and I could barely breathe. Then, he pushed the tube into my nostril as if trying to drive a stake into the ground again and again. He forced it into my stomach and poured raw eggs down my throat. These force feedings were sheer torture. But perhaps even more degrading was the charge of being thought mentally insane and impertinently questioned. We all suffer painful recollections, nightmares, and scars from these experiences. But we knew there was no turning back. As my mother used to tell me, Alice, once you put your hand to the plow, you cannot put it down until you get to the end of the row. So we soldiered on with renewed commitment, each putting our own little stones into the great mosaic that is this movement. It is not my movement, or yours, or yours. The National Women's Party is composed of women from all races, creeds, and nationalities, united in the one program of raising the status of women today. But as we stand at this crossroads, looking toward the future, we must not accept voting rights as the final battle. It is but one milestone in the long journey toward full equality. I envision and am drafting an Equal Rights Amendment, which will state that men and women shall have equal rights throughout the United States, and every place subject to its jurisdiction. Congress shall have the power to enforce this article by appropriate legislation. I intend to work toward this goal, and I invite you to join me. NWP Headquarters, Alice Paul speaking. Yes? By only one vote? Thank you. Tennessee has ratified the 19th Amendment, and women now have the right to vote. Victory is ours. Let us unfurl the banner and celebrate.